The Final Four starts on Saturday, and there are 4 number 1 seeds in the Final Four for the first time since 2008. We're going to talk about what just happened in the Elite Eight this weekend. We're going to start with the first game on the slate that was earlier on Saturday, Florida and Texas Tech. What did you think of that matchup?
Man, what a game that was. I mean, as somebody who had Florida in his brackets and had a little bit of just stake in Florida in general, it was definitely a nail biter for the majority of the game. It felt like Texas Tech was controlling that game in a way that we hadn't seen Florida be accustomed to playing that sort of game almost all season long. And they've had a couple close losses this season, but again, I mentioned before they had the fourth best point differential in an SEC conference that we've crowned as one of the best conferences of all time, in the fourth best point differential in the nation this season. And then they haven't been playing a lot of close games, not like in the tournament and just in general the whole season. So being able to come through in a close game like that, where like 5.5 minutes left in the game, they were down 10 points, and it kind of felt a little bit bleak. Walter Clayton has just been the guy for them all tournament long. He's been at least one of the guys, the guy that really sticks up when it comes to clutch time. It feels like the broadcasters were saying it felt like they put it perfectly, where in the clutch time, it feels like he plays looser instead of more uptight, which is a really good trait to have as somebody who's just been coming through for his team all year long, and especially during this Final Four run that Florida's made. He had a bunch of 3-pointers, including that step back one to kind of seal the deal there at the end of the game, where it felt like he was just going off, and it was like maybe 3 in the last like 4 minutes of that game to really put Florida up and ahead. I think they were on an 18-4 run to close that game. So a beautiful showing for them in the clutch time. And I mean, it shows that they can like blow a team out, but then also like we'll move on to this like sooner rather than later. But in a game versus Auburn where you'd expect it to be close, they can put up good numbers in a close game as well as a blowout. So a really good showing from them. Elijah Martin had a good game. Walter Clayton Jr. obviously came through for them. So just I really liked what I saw out of a Florida team. Maybe it would have liked a little bit more just from a Texas Tech team that was struggling a little bit coming into that game. But I mean, they got it done, and they're Final Four bound now.
Yeah, Florida just has shown that they can kind of win these close games too. But yeah, you mentioned the 18-4 run. They were down 9 points with just over 4 minutes remaining. That's stuff that you love to see in March. And for this team to be able to pull off a comeback win like that was great. Walter Clayton Jr., just like you said, just seems to be playing better as the game goes on. 22 points in the second half, 30 total points. March is dictated by these guards that can take over and get a bucket. And when it felt like this Texas Tech team had that game, Florida just always had a possession or two where they were able to score and not let it get too far away. I'm not really one for big ESPN probability. I actually hate it. But I think it's an interesting way to just get the point across that Florida was really out of this game, though, if there was one more bucket by Texas Tech, Florida would not have been able to bring the deficit back and end up getting a win. Texas Tech had a 95.6 win probability, like pretty late in the game. I'm assuming it's right around the time with 4 minutes remaining in the game that they had that. So it's pretty remarkable that Florida was able to pull this off. They're on a little bit of borrowed time now. They've done it twice in a row, but this is really good stuff from that Gators team, who is probably the number 1 overall seed in the entire tournament, you'd say?
No.
Really?
No.
I meant just like going into the tournament, but yeah.
I feel like Duke was pretty solidified, and then Auburn was like the official number 1 overall seed. But I mean, I like going into the tournament, they were definitely like maybe in the top 2 coming off an SEC championship. Right now, I don't think that they're. I think Auburn, especially if Dani Broom is healthy, can give them a run for their money, and then Duke has been kind of like solidified all year. But I get the point you're trying to make. Obviously, they're in the Final Four. They're one of the best.
Well, let's move into the Duke Alabama game. Let's move into Duke Alabama. We don't want to like teeter into some of the other stuff we're about to talk about later. But yeah.
Yeah, Duke, Alabama. I mean, not all that much to show for this game. I maybe wanted to touch on the Alabama Sweet 16 game a little bit more, just because I had a pick in that game that ended up being not even close to accurate because of the fact that Alabama just shot BYU out of the gym. It was an amazing performance from them. I think they shot they chucked up a 3 at the end of the half that missed. But besides that, like I think they shot 51 total threes and 50 if you don't include that last one, and made 25 of them program record and just record in a lot of different ways. It was an outstanding shooting performance, and it was definitely a thing where could they carry it over to the next game? A lot of people didn't know, and they obviously couldn't. Only putting up 65 points after putting up 113, but still a really impressive performance against a BYU team. In college basketball, if you score 88 points, there's no reason for you to lose by 25, but that's what happened, and Alabama just shot them completely out of the gym. I wanted to give the props to Mark Sears because he just had an outstanding game, 34 points in that game, 10 for 16 from three. But then going back to that Duke game, it really didn't feel like it was the complete opposite. They couldn't the shooting just wasn't there for them in that game, and then also like Duke just was like clearly the better team and asserted it from almost the jump. It never really felt like Alabama was like had a chance in that game, which is super unfortunate because they're like one of the maybe top 6 teams in the country. It just shows you how good that Duke is. But Cooper Flag coming off a 30-point performance versus Arizona, and then going into that game, he has just been great all season long, and all the question marks with him coming into the tournament, like maybe will he be completely healthy? He's been absolutely dominant, and there's a reason why this Duke team is one of the favorites to win the national championship. And just one last point on Duke. Duke came into the tournament with plus 280 odds in a tournament that features 68 teams. That just shows you how good they are. They obviously had the number 1 point differential in all of college basketball. This average point differential all season long. They were average margin of victory was 19 points. So they've been a great team, and they're just showing it throughout the tournament. You really start to look at these games, and a lot of them weren't as good as that Florida game, but you can see why, because the top 4 teams are just so good. And I think that's like in our power rankings that we did, we had the 4-1 seeds, the top 4, and there was no really it was pretty unwavering in that, and they showed why this weekend.
Yeah, Duke was extremely dominant, and I'm glad that you shouted out Alabama because when they shoot 8 of 32 from the three-point line going against a clearly superior Duke team, it makes sense that game wasn't even close, pretty much like whatsoever. About midway through the first half, 85-65 was the final score. Duke looks like they have like 3 NBA players on their team. I mean, obviously, including Cooper Flag. So they're really good, really well coached, and almost it feels like they're kind of likable at this point. So with Duke not getting, well, we just talked about a Florida Gators team that's been challenged over the last 2 games. This Duke team feels like they haven't really been presented too much of a challenge. And I was completely wrong. I can go back to a pick where I was just terribly off with. I didn't know if Cooper Flag was going to be healthy. He's clearly looking just fine. And games, whether he's maybe not shooting great, he was 6 of 16 from the floor in this last game. He still just brings in such a such a level of just like it brings the whole defense just after him, like a level of it, like a decoy, even though obviously he's out there to play basketball. He's not like injured or anything like that. And it just elevates this Duke team. I think he's so good. I mean, I'm clearly the best player in college basketball. Should we move to now the Houston and Tennessee game? That game wasn't close either.
Yeah, I just maybe want to make one more point on Duke.
Go
It
ahead.
felt like we got that signature game out of the Arizona team that like you all like
Yeah.
unfortunately had over them. Just because I like want to give you some props on that though, because of the fact that Arizona did come back and make that game close with a healthy Cooper Flag, with a Cooper Flag that we'd been talking about into last weekend. He hadn't had the game where it was maybe like the Cooper Flag game. He had that game against Arizona where he had 30 points. Caleb Love had like another one of his signature March Madness games, 35 points from him. So like not a bad pick. It's just the Duke team is just too dominant. And if you're looking at that Duke team without Cooper Flag, it's obviously a different team. Maybe that goes a different way if they don't have him. But just final thoughts on Cooper. Like again, and this is another game where we've seen 4 games from Duke now in the tournament, and it feels like they've had one game where Cooper Flag has like really asserted himself as the best player in college basketball, which he clearly is. But like the fact that they're able to dominate an Alabama team where they're maybe the 5th or 6th best team in the country, beat them by 20 points in a game where Cooper Flag has 16 points, only shoots 6 for 16 from the field. It's going to be definitely a hard matchup for Houston coming up here, but we can move on to the next game now.
Yeah, going ahead to Houston and Tennessee. I meant no disrespect to Arizona's attempt at Duke, but go ahead.
Yeah, Houston, like again, just like proved to be a little bit better. They obviously had a little bit of a scare versus Purdue, and then moving on into Tennessee, like it was one of those games where like in a weekend where I like was so adamant about the fact that maybe I'm not a big Cinderella fan because it doesn't make for good college basketball towards the end of the season. It these top 4 teams are just so dominant that it didn't matter who they were gonna be playing. Like, a lot of these games weren't close because of the fact that they're just so good, and it's been like a just a constant reiteration. I felt like in the standings thing that we did, or power rankings, I was saying how good these teams are. It really just showed this weekend. Tennessee, like, was one of the 5, 6, 7 best teams in the country as well. They had no chance. That from the jump, that Houston just jumped on. I think what was it, 24-8 or some crazy number to start out of that game. Like, Houston just asserted themselves, and it relative to all the other teams in this Final Four, feels like they have the least amount of scoring threats on this team, but they hustle so hard. They play with such suffocating defense. They've been doing it in the Big 12 all season long, and it feels like this team could, like, this is a team where if they shut you down on defense, you're just locked up the whole game. And shout out to them. They're definitely the team that hustles the hardest out of like any of these like Final Four teams remaining, and plays the best defense. So from that angle, it's really maybe not the most fun basketball to watch, but still really dominant basketball. And from a Tennessee team, thanks for coming out. They had a really good season, but I mean, Houston is been on a roll here.
Yeah, this one was over at the jump. I think the number that you were looking for was 29-10, with 3.5 minutes to play in the first half. Tennessee had 15 points at halftime. I believe that was the lowest in this tournament outside of Clemson, scoring 13 in that opening round loss.
Yeah.
I'm also taking a look here at some of the other stats. I think it was the lowest in in Elite Eight history, and the fewest by any team seeded number 1 or number 2 in the NCAA tournament. And a single half of basketball for like for whatever, like any round in the tournament. I mean, it was just unbelievable. Houston is clearly the best defensive team left. And you know what? Shout out to Houston, because a lot of people were picking the other 3, and this 4th one has now officially made this tournament make history by having
Mhm.
all 4 of those teams in the Final Four for the first time since 2008. Houston, they upheld their end of the bargain. They're here, and they are really good, and they should definitely be respected. All right, let's move to Michigan State Auburn. The last game just kind of ended, about an hour or so ago. What were you thinking when you were watching? We'll just go straight to the Janai Broome kind of injury and then comeback. What were you thinking with that? Auburn only won this game by 6, but they kind of controlled most of it.
Yeah, the box score is definitely a little deceiving for this one. Michigan State definitely like was in this game, but for a little while, especially towards the opening of that game, it felt like Auburn was just going to run away with it. They started off so hot, and Michigan State was just like had to weather, like, I think it was a 17-0 run. So like they I think they responded right after with their own 11-0 run, and then from there it was a little bit of a back and forth. But Michigan State was always like a bit of a distance away. It never felt like Auburn was really in any sort of threat. And like, just top to bottom, this Auburn team is so dangerous. Obviously, you're looking at a team that could be without not. I don't even want to say that because I have no idea what it's going to look like. He obviously ended up coming back, so maybe like it won't be any issue. But the way that he went down, it looked really concerning. Like, both his arm and his leg looked like they bent the wrong way and on the same play, which was definitely a little concerning. He had to go to the locker room. He was consoled by his parents a little bit. Almost, I think the sideline reporter was saying something like he didn't know if he's going to be able to finish the game. Had to obviously got scanned for X-rays, so that was definitely a scary sight. And then he's able to come back in the game and finish it out, which was great to see. He had a classic Janai Broome game: 25 points, 10 of 13 from the field goals. Had a double, I think, going into the second half. So just a really good game from him. And then you look at Chad Baker-Mazar. He's been like doing it all season long, and was great again today. Like, maybe not the greatest stat line, but great is definitely a stretch. He went 2 for 10 from the field, but like made a lot of hustle plays, played a lot of really good defense. Denver Jones had like a decent game too. It was really all like it was the cast of characters besides Janai Broome like came out to play as well. But this was a classic Janai Broome game where he carried them to the finish line, and like, really, this Auburn team can do it a lot of different ways, and you're seeing that Pettiford had a decent game. Was like it was the only other Auburn player in double digits today. Had some like the tiptoe play down the line where he saved a turnover and then got it like right, like a bullet pass to his guy was a really nice play. Some really clutch plays down the stretch, and Michigan State like could come good comeback bid at the end for them. Obviously, they had a lot of guys that had played well like all season long. Akins had a really good game. Richardson has been really good. I maybe wouldn't want to maybe would like to see him in a Heat uniform in the near future. He was maybe projected to go to us, so we'll see how that goes. Michigan State, good team, but Auburn, these 1 seeds, just reiterating that, has just been so dominant, and just another great showing for them.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much said it all. I'll keep it kind of short. I think if we're talking about Cooper Flagg having his moment in this tournament for the game against Arizona, I think Janai Broome definitely had his moment where he came back into the game, hit back-to-back shots, I believe. There was a point, I think, when Auburn did go on a 17-0 run during this contest. Michigan State, I actually, for some reason, think I said Michigan when we started. I don't know if I misspoke, but Michigan State, their Achilles heel was shooting. It caught up to him today. Janai Broome had his moment, and it's a good thing that he came back. He did. It was pretty scary because he did say, like, I think he asked his teammates to finish the game for him, and then he said he was done, like all this other stuff. It was pretty, like a really awkward and pretty weird looking injury, to hurt both his arm and his leg on the same play. But him coming back out there, that's just great stuff. I'm sure he'll have plenty of time now up till next Saturday to get right. And Auburn goes as far as he can take him. If he has 2 more games like that, they will be the national champions, in my opinion. I mean, it's just if he can play like he did today, unless he's running into, I guess, Cooper Flagg, right?
Yeah.
Or Walter Clayton Jr. maybe has a similar amazing game, but this Auburn team is really good. Definitely not to be played with. Did you have one final assessment before we get out of here?
Yeah, I mean, just the whole entirety of this weekend was a little bit underwhelming, I will say, leading up to the fact that there were so many great matchups. I enjoyed it, but I could have asked for definitely a little bit more. It felt like the Florida Texas Tech game was the only like really good one in the Elite Eight, and then obviously Michigan State kept it like kind of close, but that game was never in question. So I maybe wanted a little bit more from a tournament that didn't give us as much in the round of 64 and round of 32. But I mean, like on paper, these Final Four matchups should be really, really good. So we'll see how those go.
Well, let's move into the final 4 teams. We're going to be talking about the case for each of these number 1 seeds to win it all, win their next 2 games, get that trophy. We're going to start with Florida. What is the case for them to be the national champions?
Florida Gators, right? The team that is just good at feels like at every single sport. Their baseball team has won national championship. The basketball team has obviously had a dominant run there in like the early 2000s. Football team has a bunch of national championships as well. They've been there before, maybe not this team specifically, but they have an excellent head coach. Walter Clayton Jr., their leading scorer all season long, averaged 18 points a game, is one of the best players in all of college basketball, and he's proved that during this tournament run. I mean, just absolute dominance from him. Like 30-point game in this past game, and it just, again, like we said it in the recap that we just did, but it feels like he steps up in those clutch moments, and when he needs to, he'll be there for you. You have guys like Elijah Martin, who's also been there before. Brings a little bit more experience to this team. Was their second leading scorer. Has had a good tournament, maybe not the greatest tournament in the world, but I mean, between those two, and then Will Richard, Alex Condon, like a lot of really good names here, and just a lot of really good players in this Florida team. It feels like Florida and Duke are probably the 2 deepest teams in terms of like offense and just scoring wise. It feels like a lot of their guys can get a bucket for you, and Florida is just a really good makeup, really good coach. And it feels like they can this is a team that can do it both ways, and we've seen them do it both ways in the tournament. We've seen them blow teams out in the tournament. We've seen them win really close games in the tournament. We know that their guys can step up in clutch moments. So I think the case for them is the fact that they can win it both ways. They have a lot of really good scores. They have one of the best coaches in all of the country, and just a really great team overall.
And they get to play an Auburn team, which they've already beat fairly recently. We're seeing now the SEC was so dominant. They are the best team, supposedly, right? Coming out of that conference. As you mentioned, their top 4 scorers, they got 4 guys in double figures. And then it all really comes down to Walter Clayton Jr., 22 points in the second half. I'll say it again, against a really good Texas Tech team that gave them a run for their money to come back. They've already done this twice. Their eye is going to be on continuing that clutch play down the stretch and just taking advantage of what the other teams aren't able to do, and that's close them out. This Florida team, man, doesn't have any quit, and I think essentially you can look at it two different ways. One, that they're on borrowed time right now and they should already be out of here and that their time is coming, or that this Auburn team is in for a full 40-minute contest and they need to close out at the final 2 minutes at the very end as best as they possibly can, or else this Florida team just has something about them this year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree. Like this Florida team, I had them. I just watching them in the SEC this whole season leading up into the SEC tournament. I had them as the team that would lose to Duke in the national championship in the majority of my brackets, including the one that I actually cared about. So I think this Florida team definitely has a good case to win it all. And if it's not going to be Duke, I feel like Florida is definitely that next team.
Well, let's move into Duke then. All right, so the case for Duke to win the national championship.
The case for Duke to win the national championship, I think it lies in a couple different places now that we've gotten a full look at Duke with and without Cooper Flag. But I want to start with the pretty blunt, obvious. Cooper Flag is the best player in the country. He leads them in 4 of the 5 major statistical categories, which is points, rebounds, assists, and steals, and is second on the team in blocks. So either top 2 in all 5 of the major statistical categories. This Duke team set the best point differential in the whole country this season. They're one of the best team. They are the best team in college basketball, in my personal opinion. Maybe not the number 1 overall seed, but again, Shire took over the Coach K role and has blossomed in it, leading this Duke team to their first Final Four since Coach K left. And just again, a really good coach. If you're getting the torch passed down to you from Coach K, you obviously have to have some reliability and something to say for yourself as one of the really good head coaches in all of NCAA basketball. But Cooper Flag, best player in college basketball, number 1 overall pick. And then you have Con Kneppel, who stepped up in this tournament. You have Tyrese Proctor, who looked like the second coming of Curry in the first 2 rounds there. It felt like he couldn't miss. 7 for 8 against Baylor, has been one of their best players all season long, and is doing it from especially from the 3-point range in this tournament. You have guys like Con Maluak, who is their starting center all season long. He maybe he's not stuffing the stat sheets, but will put in good games for you. Averages almost 9 points a game this season. Their starting 5 has a roster of NBA guys, and if they choose to go to the draft this season, and led by the best player in the country, and one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. There's not much negative you can say about this Duke team. Best, again, reiterating the point that I just made maybe a couple seconds ago, best point differential in the country, obviously running through an ACC that maybe wasn't the greatest this year, but they are showing they can do it literally against anyone. They haven't had much of a challenge, even from an Alabama team that you think is maybe one of the best 5 or 6 teams in the country, played in the best conference. It didn't matter. They blew them out by 20. So definitely, I think that they should be able to deal with Houston, make it all the way to the national championship. And in my opinion, this will be the team to go ahead and win it all.
I think not having a challenge in the tournament might be the only kind of Achilles heel to this team, right? It feels like it's been a minute since they've really dealt with something serious, but Arizona did give them a run for their money. So I would say that they faced adversity, but we'll have to see, because Houston is definitely on that level. And I definitely think that they could give them a game, especially because just the defense for Houston is just so impressive. But you mentioned everything about Cooper Flag. Con Kneppel, he is actually so good and one of the best number 2s in the entire country. Just the way that he's playing right now and the way that he ended this season with the ACC tournament going in. They didn't need him in the first round against Mount St. Mary's, but of course they didn't. It was a 16th seed. But since that game, he has just been really, really good and just super efficient. He's not taking a ton of shots. Now, he took 15 against Alabama, so I'll give it that. But in the games against Baylor and Arizona, he took only 5 and 7 shots from the floor, in those games, and he had 32 total points over those 2 games. He is just a very efficient, can hit a 3 when you need it, and when Cooper Flag maybe doesn't have a shot falling and doesn't have that game, that he had against Arizona, I think he could come in and he's just one of the best 2s in the nation. I think that would be their best case, and why they would be able to find some scoring against maybe a great defensive team like Houston, or whoever they would end up playing in the next round, whether that's Florida or Auburn.
Agreed. I think we covered all the bases on what the case for Duke looks like.
All right, let's move into Houston, one of the best defensive teams in the country. We just talked about Duke. What is Houston's case to win the national championship?
Yeah, Houston has one of the more interesting cases. They do put up. I don't want to underscore the fact that they do have a lot of offensive talent. Obviously, LJ Cryer, Emmanuel Sharp have been good for them all season long. LJ Cryer being their top scorer, averaging over 15 points a game, and just been really like one of those gritty guards that like does a lot for his team. They do it in a lot of different ways though, and the main way that they dominate games is the fact that their defensive presence has been there all season long. Feels like watching the Big 12 like all season long. This team is just like a team that won't like give you anything if they're not shooting if the ball isn't dropping the way it should be for them. Obviously, they average 74 points a game. If they're not shooting well, they will suffocate you on defense, and it doesn't matter if the based off their head coach, they're never going to give up on a play. Like he really brings the attitude from it starts at the top and then goes all the way down for that Houston team. There's like every guy they recruit, it kind of plays the same exact way. And they have a certain style about Houston basketball, a lot different, really different from the other teams that are in the tournament. And I think it could come as like a shock to some of the other teams in the tournament. I don't know that with how well the other teams are playing, that it'll make all of the difference. But if there is going to be a calling card for this Houston team, it definitely is their defense. And then the fact that they can do it in a lot of different ways. They had four different starters score in double digits for them, average double digits for them all season long. So they can get it done. They wouldn't be my personal pick. Duke is just a little bit too strong, but I really like this Houston team, and obviously one of the best teams in the country all season long. Number one seed, one of the final four teams remaining, and between their coaching and their grittiness on defense, I think that if it turns into a game in either the final four or the national championship, if they get there, where the other team doesn't have their shot and the Houston's playing the suffocating defense that they do, that is their calling card, and that's how they could win the national championship.
Yeah, so Purdue obviously gave Houston a really good game, but the dominance that they had against Tennessee, if they can just have any sort of stretch on defense against one of these teams over the next couple of games, they will be able to have enough offense, as you mentioned. Their offense, you may not think that they have a guy like, obviously not everybody's got a guy like Cooper Flagg, but like they may not have that go get a bucket, just absolute number one dude like Janai Broom or Walter Clayton Jr. or Cooper Flagg. But if they can hold on just a little bit at any sort of stretch in the game, if they can cause the other team to have 3.5 minutes of no scoring or anything like that, this team is definitely good enough and they have enough offense. And honestly, I like this kind of angle that they have too as a national champion story. It was all about the number one seeds this year. And we're thinking which 2 seed is going to maybe break through or which Cinderella is going to maybe break through. And I know a lot of people had Houston, and that region was the one, the Midwest region was the one that people were eyeing and saying, oh, Houston's going to go down here. And they were the ones that were picked on. And now they have an opportunity. They have potentially a home game in San Antonio. It's only about 3 hours away from their campus, and they can win a national championship in their home state for the first time, I believe, since UCLA did it sometime in the 70s. That's a really good story. I think sometimes that plays. These are some really good teams. They're going to rely on their defense. They could get through Duke. They could get through officially anybody, and I think they'd have a great chance in the national championship, either against Auburn or Florida, truly.
Yeah.
Well, I said one of the teams. Let's move into Auburn. What is Auburn's reason or case for winning the national championship this season?
So everyone knows about Janai Broom, but first I wanted to start as like with their free throw shooting percentage as a team. 74% maybe doesn't like sound like the greatest number in the world for college basketball. That is like decently high, if not like one of the better free throw shooting percentages in the country. And then they have 3 guys that average 90%, or 2 guys that average 90%, and then Chad Baker-Mazara is right at 88.6% from the free throw line. This is a team that obviously has a lot of different guys, and I want to start with free throw shooting percentage first and then move down, just because I think it's so important in March if you don't make your free throws, which I mean Janai Broom had some struggles from there all season long, and it's just a little bit unfortunate. Maybe one of the reasons why their free throw percentage isn't as high as it could be. But having 3 guys like that are consistent scores for you and average over 25 minutes per game for all 3 of those guys, having those guys in the clutch is really important, and I don't think can be underscored. In any of the close games, it feels like they're never really a worry from the line. Like Baker-Mazara, Denver Jones, Kelly, they all shoot really, really well from the free throw line. So that was the first case I wanted to make. And then you look at Janai Broom. if not the best player in the country, the second best player in the country. I personally have him as the second best player in the country. He's had a great season all season long. He averaged a double double, 18 and 10, almost 18 and 11. You look at a guy like that and it just feels like he can't really be stopped. That was the reason why any case for them like winning the SEC championship when we were doing those picks was Janai Broom, like the majority of it. And then the other guys, obviously they have a lot of auxiliary pieces in Chad Baker Mazar, Pettiford coming off the bench, Kelly, Denver Jones, all of those guys are really, really good. But it really all runs through Janai Broom, just like in another asset that we were just talking about, facet that we were just talking about, Duke through Cooper Flag. Obviously, they have their guys, but Cooper Flag is the guy for that team. It essentially like revolves the same way for Auburn. They average 84 points a game and are like all of these guys. Like, if you're gonna go to the Final Four, you have to have a good coach. Bruce Pearl is one of the better coaches in all of the NCAA, and I really like the way that they play. It doesn't feel like the moment is ever too big for them, and led by a guy like Janai Broom in the post. It's just, if he's dominating the game, they're a real problem. And even if he's not, we've seen in the tournament where he hasn't had all of his best games, and this Auburn team can still dominate. So.
That's actually exactly what I was just about to touch on. I kind of think he got a little bit of a bad rap. They were looking at specifically like his field goal percentage and a couple of other statistics that were kind of down from his regular season stats. But he was kind of a little bit behind some of the pace that he had in the regular season. And this team was kind of able to still just be able to take care of business, right? Michigan didn't really give him too much. Creighton didn't give him too much. And now they're in the Final Four, and Janai Broom just had a virtuoso game that we just saw today, and they're still holding on. Great culture. One of the best conference years, if you will, of all time. So I think they can handle Duke and Houston. I mean, all these teams are certainly on the same level. You've been mentioning it like since before this tournament started. We're going to have good games if the top seeds or the higher seeds make it so late into this tournament. And that's exactly what we're going to get. It's just going to come down to who's number one is potentially better, and then let the chips fall where they may. Obviously, they don't want a repeat of what happened to them against Tennessee. I don't really know how possible that is against Florida. It's just going to be a grudge match. I really do think all of these games are going to be close. So let's move on. We've talked a lot of college basketball, and I know we were going to get to a Speak Now, Forever Hold Your Peace. I don't have one today. What do you got?
Yeah, so I just wanted to touch on how weird the situation with Taylor Jenkins is. It feels like nothing's come out since we last talked about it a couple of days ago, and it feels like the players were even more blindsided than the public was. I know that Gigi Jackson said that he was brushing his teeth when he saw the notification and thought it was like an NBA Centel report instead of like actual real news. It feels like the players, like from what they're saying, were just as confused as he was, and maybe like everybody else was. And just a couple of stats: Taylor Jenkins, most wins ever by a Grizzlies head coach. Top 10 wins since becoming coach. Top 3 defense since becoming coach. A lot of these teams like are attributed to the players on the team, but even so, like he became coach a couple years back and had to go through the John Morant situation and dealing with all of that. And even so, has been one of their better head coaches. And to fire him in the middle of the season just feels like something that is out of like it just doesn't feel real for a lot of the Memphis. I know Memphis Grizzlies fans were not unhappy with this decision. The fact that a lot of them were celebrating it online. I just thought it's a little bit odd. I know his offensive sets weren't all that towards the end of it, but just to do this in a team that is still firmly in the playoff race, if not one of the better playoff teams in the West, I maybe wouldn't go that far, but just one of the teams that are going to be competitive in the West, and to fire your team's head coach 73 games in is just odd, and it feels like there hasn't been any explanation. And John Morant and Triple J, which are the two best players on that team, being also blindsided by this. Jaren Jackson Jr. saying that he was his dog and was wasn't happy with the firing, and then John Morant also saying that he was a little bit blindsided by it too. Makes it the reasoning, the train of thought that maybe he got cut because their best players weren't happy with him. It makes that seem a little bit more unrealistic. So it just feels like everyone's asking the question why at this point, because it feels like there would have had to be something really big behind the scenes that we just don't know about, and that question still hasn't been answered. So I just think my Speak Now Forever Hold Your Peace is what is going on with the Memphis Grizzlies and what is happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm very interested that we haven't really gotten any clarification or any more news on this whole situation. This came out what now a couple days ago, and I would have thought that we would have had something. Maybe we're gonna hear something in the off season or whatever. But yeah, now eliminating the players and their thought the thought of their gripes potentially with Taylor Jenkins, it doesn't really make any sense. Just because it's also so close to the playoffs. If they wanted to fire him with a winning record, um, like 2 months ago, then maybe we have a conversation. Maybe there was, there's something like a deadline can change the momentum of this team as well. But it just also seems like this team can't really build a ton of momentum, like going into the playoffs. They don't have a all-star break to reset. They don't have a trade deadline to get a new piece. They don't have, we're not in December where potentially a rookie could catch on, mid-season or anything like that. There's nothing really there. So glad you brought some attention to it. But another thing that has been developing over the last couple of days is I may have made the worst bet of all time, is what they're calling it. I had a nerfy in a Yankees game, which is already starting out to be pretty bad, but it was Yankees Brewers. Yankees brought out their new and improved bats, right, with a bigger barrel or whatever at a certain part of like the wood. Well, what's the deal with the bats going on right now?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the logistics are behind it, but I do know that people are calling it either corked or maybe not specifically corked. But it's just that the bats apparently are crazy, and the fact that they're hitting 9 home runs on opening day is probably it like speaks to that. It is a little insane, and maybe MLB is gonna have to check on it into the season. But they've come out firing it, and you can keep going with what it ended up actually
They
happening.
ripped apart Nestor Cortez. I knew he played for the Yankees prior. I was well aware that they teed off on opening day as well, but I was just thinking, you know what, man, you can get me 3 outs, right? And Max Fried was obviously, he did his part at the top of the first. He did his thing, 3 outs, and the Brewers weren't able to, put up a run. And I'm just thinking, okay, he's going to have to last through some of those guys, and it just wasn't able to do it. And it wasn't even close. He had 3 pitches, 3 homers, and I believe they had 4 home runs still as well in that first inning. That's awful. At a certain point, he had 1 earned run for each pitch. For
Yeah.
each pitch, he had 1 earned, and that's just awful, an awful place to be. So there was no shot on that bet, essentially. Like there wasn't even a slight sweat. It wasn't like they were able to get a guy home with 2 outs left. Just wasn't even close. So to have it be the worst bet of all time. Also, there was hurricane weather, like conditions. There was that type of wind that was pushing the ball as well. I didn't even check the weather. So it's rightfully so. I may have had probably one of the worst bets of all time. And the game ended, what, 20-9 as well. So it wasn't even like it was 1-0 and the only run was scored in the first, or all the runs were scored in the first or second inning. It wasn't even close. Probably the worst bet I've ever made.
Yeah, I wanted to do an ERA calculator here just to see how. Let's see. Okay. If a pitcher allows 3 runs in 1 inning, your ERA is at 27. So through 3 pitches, Nestor Cortez's ERA was at 27 in that game. Really unfortunate, but I mean those things happen. Like if you're gonna lose a bet, you kind of just want it to be over. Like you don't want to be grassing on for straws. If they did this with 2 outs and then went back to back to back, it probably would have hurt even more. So I definitely, I mean, there's some consolation in that, and hopefully we can get on the right path here at some point.
Oh yeah, the right path is a long road. 0-4 right now, so I'm officially the fade god, but we're gonna keep at it. We're gonna keep going, see what we can what we can put together, and everything. College basketball still got the very last bit of that, and arena football, I believe, is being played as well. So we might have to change sports. We might have to completely change lanes. I don't know. Maybe I'll bet on horse racing one of these days as well, but I guess that's all the time that we have for today. We talked a lot of college basketball, so that was always great stuff. The NBA playoffs right around the corner, and the NFL draft is also fast approaching as well. I believe it's now under a month, so we're going to be talking about that as this next month goes on. This has now been the end of March, I believe. So last video in March, but thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Patrick Previty. That's my co-host Andrew Greig. We'll see you guys next time.